Well, I'm going to get a little philosophical with you guys here at the beginning, if you're okay with that. A little history and a little philosophy. In the beginning was the Word. Okay? A very thoughtful and carefully constructed beginning to one of the world's greatest passages ever written. Okay? It has always intrigued me, as well as the whole account of John's gospel. The word from the Greek logos was a very familiar word to the Greeks. Okay, this is a word that's been around for hundreds of years by this point. It was a word first used by pre-Socratic philosophers, namely Heraclitus, to refer to the rational structure of the universe. Plato, which we've all heard of Plato, would take this concept even further to explain that logos was the way in which we understood the forms of the universe. Okay, the forms of the universe. What are the forms? I'll get to that in a second. Logos was the guide that nudged us, the rational thinkers, in the right direction. Plato then conceptualized a divine logos that ordered the soul as well as the universe. Plato, now, being a true Grecian, right, thought of forms and the divine logos as unemotional and uninvolved abstractions. They exist without any personhood. A form was a thing's truest reflection. Okay, it was the epitome of that thing. For example, cats all look different. All different shapes, sizes, colors, everything. But yet, we all know when we see a cat, there's like a catness about it, right? No matter what it looks like, it looks like a cat to me, right? Same thing with dogs or lizards, right? There's a form, right? There is an unconscious awareness that there's a connection here. Okay, there's a pattern. And that unconscious awareness is the logos guiding you and me towards analysis and pattern seeking. Okay? So that's what Plato and Heraclitus referred to as forms and logos. Yet, John redefines logos in a way that would forever alter our understanding of the word. From John 1 through 5, in the beginning was the Logos. The Logos was with God. The Logos was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. That light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. This was not an unemotional, uninvolved byproduct of existence. This Logos was life and light. This Logos is a he, an identifiable and definable person. This is not some abstractive thought the unconscious stumbles upon. The Logos is interactive, present, breathing, and visual. Just like when seeing many different cats, we understand they contain a catness. This Logos is the form of humanness. This Logos is the archetype of humanity itself, the image and likeness we are made in. When we see a human, their archetype is Jesus. When you look in the mirror, your humanness is Jesus. Just as the Jewish prophets foretold the coming of the Messiah to prepare the hearts of the Jews, Plato, 500 years before Christ, was guided into a philosophy that would inadvertently prepare the minds of the Gentiles, non-Jews, for the coming of the divine Logos. I've always wondered, well, how come Jesus came when he came? And here we had the perfect point in history where we had the Roman culture who was already nurtured in this divine Logos concept, right? And that altered or structured their society and government and everything off of this kind of concept, a way of understanding the world. Then you have the Jews coming in with the heart of everything. And then here comes Jesus, the coming of both those things simultaneously. It's a beautiful picture. The true light, continuing in John, the true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. The Logos became flesh and made his dwelling among us. He pitched tent among us. We have seen this glory, his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father full of grace and truth. Out of his fullness we have all received grace in place of grace already given. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is in closest relationship with the Father, has made him known. And in just a few short paragraphs, John masterfully tied together thousands of years of Jewish and Greek thought, placing everyone, including us today, on the same page. A.W. Tozer. Have you guys heard of A.W. Tozer? One of my favorite Christian writers. Writes, "What comes to mind when you think about God is the most important thing about you." Take a moment here and think about God. What comes to mind? Is it an unemotional philosophical principle? Is it a warrior god padded with armor and a sword? Is it an old white dude with a long white beard and white robe standing above the clouds? Is there any image at all? So the theme, as we've discussed, is God of comfort. I did find it somewhat difficult, I must admit, to write a sermon around this topic, because oftentimes, go to the next slide, Scripture shows us a God of discomfort, right? God told a father to march his son up a mountain to sacrifice him. God told a murderer to return and face the people he sinned against to demand that God's people, their slaves, go free. Oh, and he had a speech impediment while doing so. God told a man to dwindle his army down to a mere 300 men before facing an army of thousands in battle. God told men to leave their livelihoods and way of life to follow him with no plans for the future. God told a murderer of Christians to begin leading and teaching the families and friends of the Christians he murdered. And many, many more examples throughout our Scripture. God of comfort. God commands us to turn the other cheek. Now, it's another sermon. It's not as simple as it sounds, but he still tells us to turn the other cheek, to step out of the boat, to forgive our enemies, no matter how egregious their sins are against us or our friends. Does this sound comforting? One of the most well-known scriptures, Psalm 23, doesn't say, "You keep me from the valley of the shadow of death." It says, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death." Yes, God may call you through the valley of the shadow of death. And we'll get to the scripture again here in a minute. The point is, if Scripture, go to the next slide, if Scripture shows us anything at all, it clearly shows that for us to accomplish God's will, we are required to change and to step out of our comfort zones. There are no exceptions. There's 66 books and about 4,000 years of examples. We are required to change and step out of our comfort zones. There are no exceptions. In my own life, I have been called to do uncomfortable things. At 12 years old, I spoke at a conference in front of thousands of pastors from across the state of Missouri. That was terrifying. A little later on in life, I was notified about 4 weeks before a service of about 3,000 people that I was in charge of 20-plus musicians and ordering service. That was pretty terrifying. I've had to stand up for the faith and lose my job because of it. That was terrifying. And I know these things, of course, pale in comparison to our scripture stories, but there are still times God intentionally called me out of my comfort zone for the sake of His will. And I know you have similar examples. I hope you have similar examples. Go ahead and go to the next slide here. Fact of the matter is, Christianity isn't comfortable. It's not comfortable. Just ask the 7,000 persecuted Nigerian Christians and 7,800 more missing right now at the hands of the Islamic faith. Ask them how comfortable Christianity is. Those numbers are actually just from this year, by the way. Over the last decade, according to, Africa Center for Strategic Studies, there have been 150,000 deaths in the last decade at the hands of the Islamic faith. And I fear if American Christians don't start getting content with discomfort, the choice may be taken from us to be uncomfortable. God of comfort. Well, as with most things, perspective is key. Perspective is key. All of these examples, both in Scripture and myself, stories around the world, focus on the effect of God's will on me. As in, how does this affect me and my life, my feelings, my circumstances? What these situations fail to consider is the kingdom perspective. Now, nothing about what I've said previously is false by any means, okay? But it is a personal perspective, and our personal perspective is a limited perspective. We can go to the next slide here. The kingdom perspective is the big picture narrative. It's the big picture narrative. As challenging as it may be, as Christians, our focus should be from the kingdom perspective, not our personal perspective. Okay? This is the perspective that Jesus taught from. This is the perspective from which God called Abraham up the mountain and Moses back to Egypt. It is the perspective that led those killed by Paul to celebrate his entry into heaven. I started out the sermon asking, what comes to mind when you think about God? This is critical because if our understanding of God is like a spiritual Santa Claus, then our suffering has no comfort. We can try to get on his good list, we can say the right prayers, we can do the right things. That doesn't mean any of our suffering will be taken from us. In Psalm 23, as referenced earlier, the part that's most often remembered by folks is, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff comfort me. Do you know what the rod and staff are used for? The rod protected sheep, obviously, but they also kept unruly sheep in line. The staff, as the hook, right, was meant to wrap around the neck of the sheep and pull it away from danger. How many times do we go in a direction and feel the staff around our neck? How many times do we get out of line and we feel the rod discipline us? This is what King David says is comforting. Why? Well, the kingdom perspective is quite simple, actually. You want to go to the next slide here? The first thing, and next one. First thing is God is sovereign over everything. He is sovereign over everything. Okay? Whether good or bad, beautiful or ugly, painful or joyous, God remains to be God in all cases. God remains worthy of our worship, as we sang about, even if we don't get our way a single day of our life. This is comforting. This is comforting because even if God is the only one on your side out of the entire world, you are in the majority. Okay? If he is the only one on your side, you are in the majority. This is comforting. 2, as described by John, God is a person, not an inanimate, unemotional principle. An inanimate, unemotional principle doesn't care what you go through. It can't care. God feels with us. Jesus weeps with us. God so loved the world that he humbled himself in the person of Jesus to save us from ourselves. This is comforting because God not only knows you personally, but he knows you as a person. He knows you as a friend. This is comforting. 3, all things work together for good for those who love God, no matter the degree of suffering. Did God stop loving the Jewish people during the Holocaust? Did God stop loving the Middle Eastern Christians in the first 1,000 years of Christianity when Islamic folks went through and butchered them, country by country? Does God stop loving us right now when we are met with hardships and difficulties? No, of course not. This is comforting because even in our demise, God makes something good out of it. Even when the devil tries his best to make the worst of a situation, God easily makes something wonderful out of it. And again, from our personal perspective, it seems impossible. But from the kingdom perspective, God is sovereign, God is a person, and all things work together for good for those who love God. Number 4, God's discipline is not punishment for wrongdoings. It is recognition we're heading in the right direction. Okay? You say the wrong thing, you do the wrong thing, God's not beating you, right? typically the discipline comes and we're moving the right direction. As a football player, coach just would harp on me. And he's like, I'm harping on you because I see the potential in you. You're almost there. That's the reason why I'm getting on you so much, right? And I always think of God in that same manner. We're working in a direction, and we're getting there. And when we feel disciplined, we shouldn't be dismayed by that. We should be encouraged by it. We should be comforted because God sees us. Like the shepherd keeps his sheep in line because he's concerned for his flock, God disciplines you because he is concerned for you. This is comforting because we have a God that will guide us in the right direction, even if it's a direction we don't want to go. Even if it's a direction we don't want to go. Lastly, and probably most importantly, God wins. God wins, right? In the end, no matter how far ahead the world gets, no matter how or who gets elected, no matter who or how much persecution there may be, the genocide or anything else that those who call themselves Christ followers, God wins every time. Every time. This is comforting because we know nothing is done in vain. Nothing is done in vain. God is sovereign over everything. God is a person. All things work together for good. God's discipline is recognition we're heading in the right direction. And God wins. Our perspective, our personal perspective focuses on me, ourselves. In which case we find no comfort. We can't. It's a perspective that assumes the universe is talking to me. You've heard that, right? I have all the bad luck. God is just picking on me. Me. The kingdom perspective, on the other hand, focuses on God, who he is, in which case we find great comfort. Go to the next slide here. Christians face no less hardships than anyone else. Christians have no more comfort in this world than anyone else. The only comfort we have is in knowing who God is and knowing that God equally knows us. There's our comfort. Like what Paul wrote in Romans 8:31, if God is for us, who can be against us? Who? That is something the rest of the world does not have. They do not have that. And that is why they lack comfort. Sure, they have vices, things that'll distract them from whatever they're feeling or the recognition maybe that they have no comfort. We, on the other hand, are honest with ourselves. We are the sparrows in the field. That Jesus says we don't have to worry about a thing because we know God will provide. A song that's helped me through some tough times, and I think is it makes sense to say here, Highs and Lows by Aodon King. I'm going to read just the first verse and chorus to you. I think it's a cool song. When it feels like the dark lingers longer than the night, when the shadows feel like giants, are you chasing me down? Tell me, where could I run from your light? Where could I hide? Hymned within your precious thoughts, there's no hiding from your love. Highs and lows, Lord, you're with me either way it goes. Should I rise or should I fall? Even so, Lord, your mercy is an even flow. You're too good to let me go. So my question for you today is, next slide, here we go. Do you see through the lens of your own perspective, or do you see through the lens of the kingdom? Do you see God as an inanimate concept ordering the universe? Or do you see him as eternal and therefore having all the time to walk with you every step of your life? In the beginning was the Word, and in the end he will be there also. This is our only comfort.